Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. Today we have a special guest, Hope Cook. Hope is a dermatology PA and certified life coach that helps providers to find healing and purpose in their own lives. If you are a fan of people who keep it real and tell the story like it is, but also who share super practical tools that you can integrate into your day starting as soon as today, this episode is for you. Without further ado, here she is, life coach and PA, Hope Cook. Hope, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here, Tracy. Thank you.
Could you take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners, tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm a physician assistant. I've been one for about 22 years, working mostly in dermatology, and a series of 2 career burnouts led me to life coaching. So I became a life coach. I still work in medicine, but I have a podcast on burnout, and I'm working on a book on burnout.
Awesome. I would love to dive right in and have you tell us about your experience professionally with burnout. If you want to talk about what happened first and then again, or kind of walk us through what that journey looked like for you.
Yeah, so the first time I experienced burnout, I had no idea what it was. I just knew that I felt dread when I went to work. And I had been so content for so many years. So it was a new feeling. And I did all the usual things. I blamed myself. I need to be tougher. I need to be more grateful for this job. I need to appreciate the lady who trained me in the field of dermatology. And I didn't know anybody else who felt that way. So I didn't really have tools. And I debated, quitting dermatology, or maybe I should be a stay-at-home mom. I had all these ideas, and finally it was, I got in a fender bender one day during lunch at the local public library. And the car was rear-ended, and my first thought was not about car insurance or, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late to go back to work. It was disappointment that I wasn't more injured, because I wanted an excuse to not have to go back to work. And I didn't feel like anything gave me permission to do that. And so that was sort of my wake-up call. Yeah, the second episode, it was crazy because everything on paper was great. I liked my boss, I liked my pay, I liked my patients, I liked everything. But I still felt this sense of like, I just don't want to be doing this. What am I supposed to do? And, I spent long time discerning what that meant. And I ultimately realized it wasn't external factors. There were parts of me that needed to change. And that's when I discovered life coaching. So it was sort of a perspective shift the second time around.
Yeah. Oftentimes we discredit our own trials and tribulations or our experience. So we think because we're in a coveted specialty like dermatology, right? Everyone thinks derm is such a great place to work, or that everything on paper is good, right? I have good benefits, I have good salary, I have good stability, I'm supporting my family, that because those boxes are checked, we somehow discount the way that we're feeling internally. Like, you can even have a great job that you used to love 2 years ago that now is no longer serving you or doesn't quite fit in the season that you're in. It's not that there's something wrong with the job, it's that you no longer are in alignment with that position, or you don't feel like that's what you want or need to be doing. So, do you still work at that position? Did you end up cutting back or quitting? What happened next?
Yeah, so I tried to quit. My husband and I had saved 6 months of emergency money, and my husband said, he sat next to me on the front porch steps one day and he said, "So when are you going to quit your job?" And I looked at him like, "What? What do you mean? I didn't know you knew that I felt this way." And he said, "Do you still want to be working there in 5 years?" And I said, "I don't think so." And he said, "So why are you still there now? Let's come up with an exit plan." And I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So, because this was the job where everything was great on paper. So I spent a few months discerning kind of what I wanted and what I needed, and decided, yeah, I think I am going to take a break from working in medicine. Luckily, my boss was able to say, "Hey, would you want to work 1 day a week or maybe 2 days a week some weeks?" And I thought about it, and I realized that my job could still fund my exploration. And so now I still work 1 or 2 days a week in dermatology. And then on the side, I do these other things, the life coaching, the writing, and podcasting.
Yeah. And in many ways, that's a smaller dose of something that is tolerable, right? So if we think about medications and toxicity or dosages, like there's a small enough dose that can be tolerated. And then there's a dose that's too much that would be harmful. The same is true for work and the number of hours that you're there. So you scaled back and said, hey, a smaller amount of this same place is sustainable for me right now. It's something that I can tolerate and deal with it also gives you time to pursue other avenues and other interests.
Yes, that's so true. And for me, it was the choice, like just knowing that I had a choice and giving myself permission, saying to myself, like, "Hope, you can do this. You can choose to stay. You can choose to go." It was like I got back in the driver's seat of my life. And once I did that, it made all the difference. And now as I pull into the parking lot, I'm like, yay, I like being here. I am choosing to be here. And that shift made a big difference.
What a powerful way to view your own life. So tell me more about what it felt like or looked like in your life when you felt like a passenger, like you were passive, like choices were being made for you, and like you weren't in control of your life.
Yeah, there were a series of people that I blamed without even realizing it. So, number one was my boss at that first burnout job. I loved to blame everything on the way she ran the place. The medical assistants weren't efficient enough. The patients were running late all the time. My kids were little, and I blamed them without realizing it. They're so needy, they don't sleep at night. And then I would blame my husband. He just doesn't get it. Like, he does not get what it's like to give, give, give all day and then come home and give some more. And so I felt disempowered. I felt, in a way, it felt good to blame other people because I didn't have to step up and make changes. And when I finally realized that I needed to leave that job, the last day I felt braver than I have ever felt in my whole life. It was the scariest thing I've ever done, but I showed up for myself and I gave myself what I needed. And I walked out of there, and I can't even describe how it felt, but I just felt like I was on top of the world.
That's so, so awesome. I remember feeling like that when I quit the job that was really burning me out. Like, I did it and I am free now. And I was having all these physical symptoms of burnout, of insomnia and illness and various other things that were happening. And when I gave notice, even though I was still going to be working there for a little while, I immediately started sleeping through the night. And I thought, oh, my body knew, right? It knew that this was the stressor. And that when I resigned and eliminated the stressor, I immediately started to feel better, like physically better, emotionally better, more empowered and in control of my life. So I want to talk about something that you mentioned in terms of when I was burned out, I was looking like it's your fault. It's the admin, it's the support staff, it's my family, it's the responsibilities. sort of all of these other things around me. And what switched when you started looking internally? And what did you discover in this healing process of like, hey, I actually think this might a little bit be me?
Yeah, there were a few things. One was a therapist, my very first solo therapy visit. She asked me, "So, what are you going to do about it?" And at first I was so put out, I was like, "Wait, what?" By asking that, she thinks that I have agency over the situation. But it planted a seed and it really made me think about it. And then we hired another PA. So it was just me and the supervising doctor, and we hired a new PA. And I saw how she was treated. And I saw it through new eyes because it wasn't me, it was somebody else. And I felt like she was being mistreated. And, I'm like, gosh, why doesn't she leave? And then it hit me like, why am I still here? Why am I allowing myself to be treated that way? So, it was a slow revealing. And I think once you start on this journey of sort of admitting you're burned out, life will present you with evidence to support that whatever it is you need to do next. And for me, it was like, yeah, I need to look around and see which parts of my job I have control over. And the third thing was I'd read this book about the Seattle fish market. And I decided I was going to turn my office around. I was going to get rid of the toxic culture. And I sent out an anonymous survey. We only had like 12 people working there. And people were terrified to fill it out because they didn't want the boss to see their handwriting and know who it was. But the one thing that everybody said they wanted to change was the practice owner, the supervising doctor. And that's when it hit me like this, in this situation, I can't change the doctor. I can't change other people. And I knew at that point I had to leave.
Such an eye-opening thing, because oftentimes we look around and we say, these are the things that are affecting me, right? This person, this situation, this setup, this culture. And what we don't say is, but I can affect whether or not I'm in this situation. So I can't affect whether this practice is owned by this specific person, but I can determine my proximity to them. Like, do I keep showing up for work? Do I keep coming? And this is the place where I'm earning a living. And there is something that you can control. You can't control who that practice is owned by, but you can control where you work. So sometimes focusing on, instead of that victim mentality of like, oh, this is just happening to me and I can't make a difference, but rather saying, well, what can I actually change? Can I go get a new job? Can I switch specialties? Can I move to a different office? Those are all things in your control.
Yeah. So I had to open myself to possibility because I was also stuck in the mindset of, I have a non-compete. I can't work at another office. I can't do this. I can't, anything somebody would suggest, I would say, oh, I can't do that. And that went on for months. And finally, it was like a little crack opened up. And I thought, well, what if I could? What if I could work at an office an hour away? Like, what would that look like? Would it be possible? And I just sort of opened myself up to possibility. And that's when things started sort of falling into place.
And that sort of dreaming or wondering or thinking about the possibilities, that takes time and space and intentionality. And I found that when I was burned out, I didn't have the room to sort of mentally sort of pursue those or the energy to do it, because I felt like I was just so at or above capacity with all of the demands of my life that even like the cadence of your describing that exploration would have stressed me out. Like you're saying it like nice and slow. Like you're like, what if I could? What would that? And I'm like, "Ugh," like that would have just been like too much for me or not enough.
You're right. And the first client I ever had, I made a mistake. She was in that drowning mode of burnout where you're like, I can't even keep my head above water, I'm barely surviving. And I tried to ask her to imagine what she wanted her ideal job to look like. And she got this like scared, overwhelmed. She's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So I've learned there are 3 phases of burnout. And in the first phase, you are in that survival mode. Your sympathetic nervous system is kicked in, and you really can't activate the creative, like, what if ideas. So you have to get through that first stage with just, what are my needs? What do I need in this moment? And really, it is like a cocoon. You just sort of go within. Your body's not ready to transform into a new thing yet.
Finding the perfect gift for everyone on your list, well, it can be quite a challenge. And when you're a busy professional trying to choose thoughtful, high quality, personalized gifts, you know that all too well. Thankfully, there's KML Expressions, a PA mom-owned business that can personalize almost anything. From ornaments to occupation-specific items for PAs and more, Crystal has got you covered. Don't even get me started on how cute her stuff is. Even the hardest people to buy for, there's a gift for them at KML. Head to the link in the show notes to place your order today. So tell us more about that healing process and what the other phases are, because I know there are people listening who are in that overwhelmed, overworked, like completely overstimulated phase. What's next, and how do we get along this process so we don't stay stuck where we are in burnout forever?
Yeah, so I call it CPR because we're all in healthcare and that's easy to remember. So the C is the cocoon or the contemplation phase. That's all the inner work. It's not sexy, it's not fun, but it's where you have to really ask yourself, what do I need? What do I want? What is my body trying to tell me? And I have exercises that I walk people through when they're in this phase, because it really isn't an external, you're not getting your resume ready in this phase. Eventually, you start entering the second phase, which is the planning and preparation. And that's when you do start seeing those glimmers of hope and possibility. And you know that you're there when you can start daydreaming. So if you can daydream and you find yourself thinking like, what if? I use the metaphor of, like, if you're in a relationship, you break up, it's like horrible. You can't even imagine dating somebody else. And you're just in that broken state. That's the first phase. The second phase, it sometimes takes you by surprise. Like, you may be in a coffee shop and you're like looking at somebody and you think, what if? He's kind of cute. And it's that, like, maybe I could. And so that the first stage is like you dream and you scheme, and then you start planning and you start putting plans into place. You know, who could I talk to? What are my options? Could I talk to HR? Could I work part-time? Do I need to meet with the financial planner? And then the third phase is resign or revive. You kind of make the choice. Are you going to stay and craft your job to make it what you need, or are you going to leave? It's like jumping off the diving board.
Sure. Yeah. I love that the end point of this is you making an empowered decision about whether this place is going to meet your needs during this season or not. And there's something so powerful about once you've decided and you're either going to stay and make it work and change some things, or you're going to go, that you are no longer passive, right? You are no longer like, these things are happening to me, but rather, I've made an intentional decision. This is a strategic move. It feels so much more powerful to me than, I'm stuck here, I'm burned out, I hate my job. Why did I go into medicine? I'm questioning everything about my entire life and career choice up until this point.
Yeah. I have a permission slip that I typed up, and I have clients sometimes fill in their name and date it and sign it. And it is basically like, I give myself permission to live my own bleeping life, to do what I need to do, to put up boundaries, to get rid of shoulds, to stop people pleasing, whatever it is that I need to do, I give myself permission to do that.
Wow, that's so, so cool. So, do you think along this process that it's possible to be healed from burnout? Says the woman who is like wondering, like, will I ever arrive at a place of healing after I've been burned out?
That is a good question. I think of it as a spiral. So I know people don't want to hear that, but I think you sort of loop around again because we never meet our needs fully. It's not a finish line where you arrive, you figured out life, and you never have new needs that pop up. So more than anything, I think burnout is a wake up call that something needs to change. It may be you, it may be external factors, but something needs to change. So yeah, like the second time I experienced burnout, it was an inner pull to listen to this part of my life that I'd been ignoring for so long, this part of me that wanted to be creative and wanted to step back from medicine and have a different identity for a little while. And it was, yeah, my life asking me, hey, will you listen, please? And your life will speak to you throughout your career. So, burnout is just a symptom that you need to sort of ask yourself, what is it that I need? What is it that my body and my inner self is trying to tell me?
Mm. Yeah, when I was burning out, I feel like that was happening quietly and subtly, and then less quietly and less subtle in terms of the physical manifestations of my burnout. Like my body was like, please slow down. Like, please don't do this. And then finally it was like, we can't keep going like this. Like, you physically cannot keep going at this pace with this level of stress. I will make you sick so that we can get your attention or so that you'll listen, which is not a great way to do it, but it was effective.
Yeah, I mean, we do, as in yoga, they say you hold issues in your tissues, and your body really is like a compass that can point you towards your North Star or towards whatever it is. I use it all the time to tell me, should I be on this committee? Should I go to this conference? Should I, do this weekend? Like every day I try to use it now. And I was like you, I ignored it for so long.
Mm. Yeah. So talk to the person listening who is feeling maybe the prodrome of that burnout, who's feeling maybe angry or resentful or has some rage. What is that telling us about the things around us or kind of where we are in our lives and careers?
Yeah, a good visual that my daughter's therapist gave her when she was about 7. She had bean bags, these little bean bags she would plop on the floor, and one had an angry face. And she would say, "Anger never sits by itself. Anger likes to hang out on top of other emotions. You just have to lift it up and figure out what's on the underneath part of it." And she had other bean bags that said sadness or fear. So if you are experiencing rage or resentment, this is a sign your needs aren't getting met. You have to figure out what your needs are. It is like such a dead giveaway for me when I am snapping at my family that I need something I'm not giving myself. It's like the tip of the iceberg. So the underneath part of it is going to do the most damage. You may only see me giving really short, curt answers, but underneath it's a much bigger issue. So, I mean, my kids now will say, like, do you need to go have a timeout? Do you? Yes, I do. Or at work, if I'm snapping at my medical assistant, if I'm getting really annoyed, over the top annoyed with a patient. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as, I need to pee. I have not peed all day. Or I am so hungry because I skipped lunch or whatever.
I have found the older that I get, the more I realize how inept I was initially at figuring out what my own needs are. So, do you have any tools or like a body scan, or how do we, in that moment where we're like, oh, my husband and I call this coming to the edge, when I'm coming to the edge of like my patience, of my ability to handle the situation, when you feel yourself coming to the edge, how do you figure out what those needs are?
Yeah. So I'll ask myself, like, what do I feel physically? And that is sort of like a body scan. So sometimes it's like, I've got this throbbing in my head, or my stomach is gnawing itself. And then there's something in British espionage called walking back the cat. I don't know where that term came from, but they would walk back the cat. They would sort of do it in rewind, slow motion. So I will think back to why am I so pissed off right now? And I'll sort of play it back. Okay, well, that patient was running late. And then, like Brene Brown says, what is the story in my head? So the story in my head is that, the front office does not care about me. They're taking advantage of me. And I sort of go through that in my head. And usually I can pinpoint what it was, what my unmet need was, and what the story in my head is about it. And then I come up with an alternative story. And it doesn't even have to be the truth. Like, you can make this up, which is crazy. I do this with my husband, and he'll say, like, how do you, what are you talking about? Like, let's say a neighbor does something and he thinks it's really rude and he's ready to go over there and like let him have it. And I'll say, yeah, but what if his sister just passed away and he's just been at the funeral? And my husband's like, what are you even talking about? You just made that up. And I'm like, yeah, but you get to choose how you see a situation. You get to choose your response. I'm not always the best at it. I mean, there are days when I snap at everybody, but it's just knowing there's an alternative makes me feel better.
Yeah. And also that opens your mind to the possibility that the one thing that you told yourself about that disrespectful patient who doesn't value your time and doesn't care and doesn't blah, 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 maybe it's not that, right? Maybe there's something else. And sometimes that's enough to switch you from, "Oh, I'm just so mad I can't see straight," to, you know what, I have been late before, right? For legitimate reasons, these things exist. So.
Mm-hmm. If you can pause even for like one deep inhale, one deep exhale, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It calms you down. You're no longer in that fight or flight or fawn or freeze mode. You're like, okay. So yeah, I'm reminding myself to breathe. I used to have a sticky note on my computer to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are a lot of women listening who, I think in particular, women with probably the special subset that is mothers, who this concept of meeting your own needs, of tuning into what you want, is very foreign. I would even go so far as to say these moms could tell you what their kids need, and maybe what their spouse needs, but probably not what they need. So how can we as moms rewire our brains so that we are not at the bottom of the list? So we are not the one whose needs continually are unmet while everyone else around us gets what they need.
Yeah, that's hard. I still struggle with that. What a smart therapist once said was, so Hope, it sounds like you can choose guilt or resentment. What happens if you choose each one? And so I sort of play it through in my head. If I choose to feel guilty about this, how's that going to play out? How am I going to treat my kids if I do feel guilty? How do I want my kids to see me showing up in the world? Being a working mom, that's a perfect example of how many of us have felt guilty, that we couldn't stay home with a sick kid, or we couldn't go to that school function at 10 a.m., in the middle of a work day.
On a Tuesday, yes.
Yeah. And so I try to reframe it and think, okay, what am I choosing? Because it is a choice. Again, you're not a victim. You are choosing to work. Why is work important to me? You just keep asking yourself these questions. Work is important to me because one of my values is showing up as a PA for my patients. And, it's what I choose in this moment. Some days I will choose to block out my patients and go to my kids' function. So just taking it one step at a time. If you choose resentment, that is absolutely going to poison your energy towards the people around you. And I found that to be true in marriage too. So when I find myself keeping score and feeling resentful towards my husband, it sours everything around us. And it's really boils down to awareness. So you have to check in with yourself. If you feel like meditation is like too big of a thing, like, can you sit quietly in your car at lunch? Ask yourself what your values are. If you are aligning with your values, then you can let go of that guilt.
You might not know this about me, but one of my most despised tasks as a clinician is charting. That's why I'm always searching for hacks, tools, and tactics to make charting more accurate, efficient, and less of a huge pain in the butt. If you too want to spend more time connecting with your patients and less time pointing, clicking, and typing into their chart, you should definitely check out Freed AI. Freed AI is a medical scribe on a mission to free clinicians everywhere from the purgatory that is writing notes. Freed AI listens, transcribes, and writes your medical documentation for you. You can even use the code PA50 for $50 off your first month with Freed AI. These notes are written in your style and done for you by the end of the visit. Can you imagine what it would feel like to leave work on time, notes done, without having to crack your laptop open in the evening? Freed is HIPAA compliant, completely secure, and it takes less than 30 seconds to learn. Get back to what you love doing, treating your patients, and let Freed AI do the rest. Yeah, that invitation to be aware of what you value and how you're feeling is such a strong one. And I love that you said, hey, if I choose resentment, if I choose guilt, because when I was burned out and when I first started this podcast, you can actually go back and listen to episodes at the very beginning. I was super resentful of the freedom that Dan had, that he didn't have this mental load, that he didn't feel responsible for taking our kids to the dentist. And I said it like over and over in episodes to the point where Dan used to edit our podcast episodes and he was like, do we need to talk about the dentist? Like, is this a problem? Is this a problem? Because you won't shut up about it on the podcast. You keep telling everyone about how you're so burdened by our kids needing to go to the dentist and the doctor. And but I was like resentful by default. So I would not have told you, oh, I'm choosing to be resentful in this moment. I was like, oh, I have to do all of these things. I'm the mom. So even though we both work, I'm the one who has to get them out and take them to the dentist or get them out and take them to the doctor. I didn't think, oh, I'm choosing to be resentful. And I could have said, I'm choosing to hash it out with you and say, hey, take our kids to the flipping dentist. Their teeth need to be cleaned twice a year. And there's two of us. So maybe you take one and I'll stop, bitching and moaning about it on the podcast. But instead, resentment was my default. Like that was just, I was default resentful. And I didn't ever realize I was choosing it. And I didn't realize there were other options available to me.
It's so hard though. I mean, even this morning, I took my 16-year-old to school and he wanted to stop by and he was using his money, but he wanted to buy a biscuit. And I am thinking, I need to go home and write. I need to go home and write. This is putting me behind. He's slow to come out to the car. And I made a passive aggressive comment and he called me on it. He said, you didn't have to take me to school today. And I said, you know what? You're right. I chose to take you. I like driving you to school because that's when we can talk. And sometimes you just need a reminder of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes our kids are the best ones at holding up that mirror and saying, hey, you said it, or you did it, or and it's a good realization for sure.
It's so true. And then you will, once you start feeling that like resentment, you'll look for evidence to support that. And you will collect that evidence. And it just really impacts your whole life. And, Bronnie Ware, the hospice nurse that wrote The 5 Regrets of the Dying, she says the number one regret of people on their deathbeds was that they didn't live lives true to themselves. Instead, they followed the shoulds. I should do this. I have to do this. I need to do this. So I don't want to be one of those people when I'm 90. I really want to start now and ask myself, like, what do I want? What do I need? Show up in your life.
Such a great reminder. So, to the person listening who is like, I need to read Hope's book when it comes out, I need more of her, tell us where they can find you on the internet, all about your podcast, and what we can look forward to in terms of the book.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Physician Assistant Burnout. You can find it on all platforms. I would love for any of you to be beta readers, so reach out on my website, Coach Hope Cook, COOK.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Coach Hope Cook.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all about your experience and your great wisdom.
Thanks, Tracy. I enjoyed it.
Recording podcast is so weird. Some episodes make me feel so energized and ready to take on the world and go out and employ things and do things. And this conversation with Hope made me want to press pause and slow down and take a look inward and ask myself, is this life that you're living the life that you want? And if not, what would have to change in order for you to be living a life in alignment with the things that matter? Because not one single person wants to get to the end of their life and realize they did things because they wanted their life to look a certain way instead of feeling the way that they really wanted their life to feel. Thank you, as always, for joining us on another episode of The PA is In. That's all for now. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.